Split pushing is without a doubt the best way of carrying any game in Diamond and below. There's a reason that if you watch any Challenger players smurfing in lower elos, that they almost always stay away from their own teammates and choose to make solo plays instead. You just have so much more control over what's happening around you because you don't have to rely on others to succeed. The only variable to control is you, which means that a Challenger player smurfing will obviously be able to come out on top of any situation they find themselves in. You, on the other hand, don't have those skills. So, although split pushing is the best strategy you could do to win a game, unfortunately, it also happens to be the hardest macro strategy to execute, and you're probably messing it up. This means that whenever lower elo players try to split, so many things tend to go wrong. You just get collapsed on by multiple members, or your allies die before you can pressure towers, etc. It just feels like it doesn't work with bad teammates, which is a shame because things going wrong so often makes players give up on learning how to properly split. So that's what this guide is going to teach you. We'll be covering some of the major mistakes that we see all the time from players trying to split push, and then what you should actually be doing so that you're way more consistent when trying to utilize this OP macro strategy. And keep in mind, this is just one of hundreds of famously effective guides that are designed to help you climb stupidly fast over at Skillcapped, along with our Challenger tailored courses that focus on the things that will actually help you climb, just like this video does. If you're serious about improving in League of Legends, then sign up and use our service actively. And if you don't significantly rank up, you can claim a full refund, so there's no risk. And with that said, let's get into it. There is one simple mindset you need before anything else in regards to split pushing, which is immediately where so many players go wrong. Splitting is not a solo play, it is a team-based play. This sounds a bit weird, but let's explain. Yes, you will be alone, so everything that happens around you is in your direct control. Whether you outplay people in a side lane is ultimately up to you, and you don't have to rely on your teammates playing properly. However, deciding when and how you split should be a decision based on what your own team is doing. Typically, you only need to think about what your opponents are up to in a game of League, but what makes split pushing so difficult is that you need to properly account for your opponents as well as your own teammates, and that's where things start to break down for your average player. This is by far the biggest mistake we notice when analyzing lower elo players, and it's going to seem super obvious when we point it out here. Looking at this example, Fiora and her teammates have a massive lead. They're up 8,000 gold and have Baron buff on top of that, so they're well poised to close out this game. However, notice how far ahead Fiora is in relation to the rest of her team. This is what's known as not matching tempo. Her teammates have zero pressure on the map at the moment, which means that the entire enemy team was free to collapse on Fiora and kill her for an easy shutdown. Meanwhile, her allies could do nothing in response as that happened, so the kill goes entirely for free. Now that Fiora is down, her teammates also mess up and give some shutdowns of their own. The blue team went from being 8k gold behind to only around 5k now, and it's all off of Fiora's lack of matching. This is the #1 cause of thrown games from split pushing, not matching tempo. All it means is that you and your teammates are both pressuring something at the exact same time. This makes it so that your opponents have to make a tough choice. If they respond to you, your teammates take something else on the map, and if they decide to kill your team, then you just take a bunch of their towers or maybe even an inhibitor. Now, the argument against this is that how are you ever supposed to sync with your teammates? They play randomly, so how do you actually coordinate anything? That's super easy to answer actually. You can sync up everything yourself. You don't need your team to match what you're doing. You can just make sure that your and their pressure is matched all on your own. In this Fiora example, all she had to do is step back for like 10 seconds and give her team time to group and start pressuring. Then she could do the exact same thing she tried to do and they'd be matching tempo. That was an issue of being too far ahead. The next problem stems from being behind on tempo. Here's another example where we actually have two split pushers at the exact same time this game. Kassadin and Yorick are pushing top and mid lane respectively, while their teammates set up to contest Dragon. Let's take a look at the moment that Dragon spawns. What are our split pushers up to? Yorick is in the center of mid lane, super far away from any tower right now. Likewise, Kassadin is kind of close to a tower to pressure, but he has no wave to work with. He may as well have even less pressure than the Yorick currently does. So because both of them are not pressuring anything important at the moment, their teammates just get collapsed on at Dragon and all die. Because Yorick and Kassadin both had no real pressure, the enemy was able to kill their teammates and still have enough time to recall and defend their base. This was terrible on both of their parts. It's easy to say that their teammates just got engaged on way too early and should have given them more time to split. But that's not realistic. You can't control your random teammates. Better yet, Kassadin and Yorick should have both fixed this issue easily on their own. Here's how. If you're going to commit to split pushing, then you need to be aware of when the objective is spawning and how much time you actually have to begin pressuring. Before Dragon, Yorick actually set up a recall timing exactly 35 seconds before it spawned. This is not enough time to buy items and get back out on the map to pressure a lane. All he bought was some mediocre item components. Because of that, at this point, Yorick should have realized that he'd be late to the split push, so he should have just canceled his recall and begun trying to pressure either mid or bottom if he was sure he wasn't going to join at Dragon. This way, he would have been pressuring a tower when it spawned, and his teammates wouldn't have died for free. Now, let's watch what Kassadin did prior to the fight. In his case, case, he saw all 5 members of the enemy team on the map and was properly pressuring top lane as a response. However, he does a quick stop to do Krugs before finishing the tower. This is a colossal mistake. Typically, you actually do want to take jungle camps in the area as you split push, but you only take them if it doesn't cost you any pressure as a result of it. Let's rewind to the second Kassadin decided to do Krugs. Take a look at his minion wave and where his next incoming one is. It is still in his base. It's not going to be here for ages, so this one wave is all Kassadin has to work with. The problem with doing Krugs is that he allowed most of his wave here to die while he did the camp. Yes, he's still got the tower, but now he has nothing to work with. He cannot push anymore. He's basically useless up here. Let's swap perspectives and watch that from Malphite's point of view. He was rushing up here thinking that Kassadin was going to take his entire base, but he saw the wave dying to his tower and he realized there's not much threat up here anymore, so he just joined up with his team to win the dragon fight and wasn't punished for it. Matching tempo is by far the biggest difference between a good split pusher and a bad one. Let's watch a player who does it properly like this Yorick. Look at where he is in relation to when dragon is spawning. It spawns in 10 more seconds, but he's already in position to hit the tier 2 tower. Now, this Yorick doesn't even have the luxury of a winning team compared to the other examples, and his teammates predictably lost the fight at dragon. But because he was already in position to threaten their base, Yorick managed to trade an inhibitor for his team's deaths. That's what proper tempo matching looks like. Okay, so we've hammered it in just how important it is to sync up with your teammates. You both want to be pressuring something at the exact same time, so your opponents have to make a tough choice between where to be. Which brings us to our next big mistake. The choice has to be tough, or your split will not be good at all. Let's give you an easy hypothetical. Imagine that you are splitting bot, and you're about to pressure an outer tower. Meanwhile, your team is contesting the Baron 4v5 at a disadvantage. Although you're pressuring the tower, do you think the enemy team will think twice about engaging and trying to abuse their numbers advantage? Of course not, right? It's just one outer tower. Winning a fight and getting Baron is definitely worth it for them. Which brings us to our second big mistake. Matching tempo is pointless if making a decision for your opponents isn't hard. What makes split pushing so OP in solo queue, especially in lower elos, is that it creates tension. You're against 5 random players who don't have voice comms and who have very loose coordination. So when you and your teammates are pressuring 2 different things, this creates chaos. Your 5 opponents then have to make a choice for how to respond. Remember, these are 5 different real-life people. They've all got their own ideas and biases for how to play the game. Chances are they'll all have a different idea for what the correct response is. Then they'll have to come up with some sort of agreement for how they'll proceed, which they have to communicate through pings or text, which can get hectic and confusing. And then they all have to execute on that and hope it works. You've all experienced this. Think about that one time where there was a Tryndamere in your base and the panic that went through your team as that happened. That is the feeling you want your split pushing to cause in the enemy team. What we don't want is something like this. This Warwick is preparing to split push in top lane with his Rift Herald. However, we want you to look at the map state right now. His team is winning the game pretty handily. Not only that, but he just saw Zed up here. Meanwhile, we can see that the enemy bot lane is being hard shoved in and are missing a lot of HP. Simply put, the enemy team will not contest Dragon. It's just not going to happen. So Warwick pressuring top while Dragon is spawning doesn't cause a tough choice for his opponents. Yes, he's matching tempo with his teammates who are doing Dragon on spawn. Technically, they're pressuring 2 things at the same time, but if they're not going to fight over Dragon, then the enemy team really only has one option. They give it up and maybe try to kill Warwick. And that's what Zed does. He just stayed top and helped Fiora secure a 1k bounty. This was a situation where Warwick didn't have to split. He could have just played back and let his team get the free Dragon without having to do anything himself. You want to make sure that your split actually causes tension. The choice for your opponents cannot be simple. The 2 things being pressured need to create a tough decision that your opponents have to make, which they will likely mess up. Like this Garen, for example. He's level 15 and has 3 completed items, which includes a Hullbreaker. Needless to say, if he's left alone, he will destroy the enemy base in a matter of seconds. After that little gateway, take a look at the map. His team is converging at Baron, so Garen walks back into all of his opponents. This is definitely a tough situation for them. Do they respond to Baron, or this Garen that's about to destroy their entire base if they leave? And look what it does. They decide to try and commit to killing him. They botch the engage and then desperately try to chase him, looking silly in the process. Your opponents will look like this too if you also put them into tough spots. Just like that, Garen gets his losing team a free Baron. And that is the key to split pushing properly. Matching tempo as well as matching the value of both things being pressured is the key to properly split pushing in most situations. But there's still 2 more really common mistakes we want to talk about when it comes to splitting, so let's wrap things up with those. The first is in regards to teleport. Let's ask you a simple question. What do you think is the main use of TP as a split push champion? Many of you may immediately think of the ability to just teleport to a fight and join your team. Let's say someone responds to your split push, then you TP to the fight and have a 5v4 advantage. If you thought that, that's good. It's actually a proper macro play. The problem is that lower elo players tunnel vision way too much on how good teleport could be. Everyone overvalues this summoner spell. You gotta make sure it's up for those key game-winning moments, so never use it unless you have to. And this is another major reason why split pushers fail to make game-winning plays. High elo players do not hold their TP for long. Watch them play and you'll see that they don't hesitate in the slightest to just randomly teleport to a minion wave in the mid-game. Yes, TP might give you a crazy good play at some point. It might also not, so stop overvaluing and holding the spell forever. If you see a situation to use it, then just use it. Here's a clear example of what we mean. This Illaoi player clearly likes split pushing, as most Illaoi players do. She's been getting a lot done on the map, taking towers left and right, and it takes almost the entire enemy team to bring her down whenever she's pushing. She's obviously having great success while being alone and splitting. She's going to face some problems soon though. When she spawns, look at her team. They still have Baron and they're pushing a couple of lanes. Now, if we asked you, is there any good teleport spots here? Most of you would say no, and you'd be right. There isn't anything particularly good to TP to. Swain is occupying top lane, and the wave is pretty far from the next tower anyway. Mid lane is already pushed in by Zeri and Soraka. Meanwhile, the bot lane wave is pretty small and not close to any tower either. Basically, there's no immediate place where you TP to, right? Let's watch what happens though. She decides to walk towards a lane instead. Meanwhile, the enemy team sets up an engage onto her allies and immediately kill her Soraka. This prompts her to awkwardly teleport in, and she dies as well. Obviously, this isn't great. The fight wasn't awful, but going even-ish when you're up 10k gold isn't a good outcome. None of what happened here was Illaoi's fault, by the way. We don't want that to be the message, but the point of splitting properly in solo queue is that you can avoid situations like that entirely by understanding how to pressure the map. In Illaoi's case, let's go back to the moment she spawned. Look at this bot lane wave. It doesn't look like a great teleport spot, right? But let's frame it differently. Imagine if the game prompted her, hey, would you like to magically appear in this spot right now? Her and every single one of you would immediately say yes, and that's the key here. She'd be matching your team's tempo on lanes, and it'd be much harder for the enemy team to look for an engage in mid if she was pressuring the bot lane tower. And that's the big thing you need to learn if you're going to run teleport. Stop waiting for some magical moment where it's going to be this insanely high value spell. Stop waiting for the perfect flank or the perfect backdoor opportunity to press it. Good players have zero hesitation when it comes to using it. If they ever see even the smallest of benefits of pressing the spell, they will. League is just a messy game where nothing is ever going to go perfectly. So planning on something like that is silly, and you should always just take what you can get. Moving on, the final common error from split pushers we want to discuss is the fear of dying or making a mistake. To split push properly, you're going to die from time to time, and you'll definitely make mistakes. Split pushing is pretty hard to do properly, but you won't learn how to abuse it if you're scared of looking bad or losing games. Take this Nasus for example. He pushes the tier 2 top tower while his teammates trade some kills in mid. That's fine. That follows every rule we've laid out in this guide. So far so good. But now he's in a tricky situation. The dragon is up and the enemy team already has 3 of them. If they get this, it's Dragon Soul for them. Nasus needs to make sure his team gets this objective. Pretend it's you in this game. Take a look at the death timers and where his own teammates are on the map. What do you think he should do to get this objective? Maybe some of you thought to teleport to the dragon. Not a bad choice, though that could lead to a coin flip where Fizz might steal it, but a decent choice anyway. What we really want here though is for Nasus to just push top. If he goes to the tower right now, the enemy Fizz and the spawning Twitch and Senna will need to respond to it. If they don't respond to his push and just go to dragon, they'll lose their top and middle inhibitors, and if they do respond, Caitlyn and Lulu easily take the dragon. The only downside is that Nasus dies, but that's fine. This is a major issue we notice from so many lower elo players. Like if we ask you in this video, is dying for dragon worth it? Almost every single one of you will immediately say yes, but players are so unwilling to actually do that in game because they're afraid of looking bad. Instead of putting his life on the line, Nasus just runs around aimlessly and the enemy team collapses on Caitlyn and Lulu. Now they've lost Dragon Soul and the game is infinitely harder. Let's compare that to the same Garen we were watching previously. Here is a literal exact copy of the situation we just analyzed. Garen is pushing in the base and presses tab. We can see that the enemy team has 3 dragons and that the next one is spawning soon. Let's hear his real-time thoughts on the matter.
I'm just gonna stay here, try and get dragon. I need to make it very hard for them to contest dragon. Even if I die for this, I don't care.
And that's exactly what he does. When the dragon is close to spawning, he hard commits onto the thresh to bait most of the enemy members to try and kill him. Meanwhile, his team can easily set up and secure the dragon, denying the soul buff. And what he says next is the reason why high elo players rely on split pushing so much.
You really have to make sure you don't give this soul over, but I think that's worth. And this way, like, I don't have to rely on my teammates, right? Like, I don't have to be like, oh, let's hope we play the 5v5 properly. I just guarantee that we get it if I just keep pressuring there.
Garen did have the choice of going to fight for that dragon fair and square. However, that leaves things up to chance in a fair 5v5, and that's not how good players carry lower elo games. Taking control of the situation himself and ensuring his team gets dragons single-handedly is how you get consistent results in solo queue. Keep in mind, if you think you might like to learn from live action guides, then you should know those Garen examples were just a taste of the full-length live commentaries featured on our platform. We upload a ton more every week over at Skillcaps, where you can learn all the things challengers do in your elo to easily win on any champion. We also have the world's best courses if you're interested in truly mastering your macro or any other fundamental in League of Legends, so definitely consider giving us a try. Hopefully in this guide you've seen that if you avoid the more common mistakes around split pushing, that you can have way more success with it and control over the outcome of your games. Thanks for watching.